A little over a year ago, we went down to Supernova, and to give people an idea of what I was doing as far as the casting was concerned, I made up some Predator Gauntlet blades, and I put them out on display in 3 different stages. One was the raw cast, one was the 50% prepped, and the other one was the final blade finished up. And I did that as a bit of an example so people could see the process that I go through as far as the aluminium casting is concerned. And I always had it in mind that I was going to take these blades and get them finished up and put them in a working gauntlet. And that starts today. Now, what I've come up with, normally I'd go through the build process and let you guys see how I actually come up with it. But because the mechanism that I wanted to create for these was a little bit complicated, I wasn't even confident in my own mind that I'd be able to make it work. So I've gone ahead and made it up first, and then I'll break it down and describe all the parts as best I can to give you an idea on how it's built. The internal workings is based on how a switchblade works, in terms of you've got a small amount of movement in the lever, which creates a large amount of movement in the actual blade. The difference is normally the blade operates on the inside mechanism, and I've had to modify my thinking of the design to actually get that to work on the outside. The idea being is that these blades are going to be mounted on the side there, and the operation of it will pull them forwards and backwards. And what we end up with is this. That builds up tension in the spring internally, and in the last centimetre of movement, it fires it forward. That is now put in a lock position for the return mechanism, and the idea now is that that backward motion again builds up tension in the spring, and once again that last centimetre fires it back, and that is repeatable each time. So if you can imagine the blades put either side there, you can imagine how that forward and backward movement will work. So internally, what we've got with this cradling piece is the spring release mechanism for the part that actually carries the blade. There's a leaf spring that goes across the top of that so they return by themselves, but at the moment I've got it pulled apart so you can see how they work. Normally this sort of mechanism would be done internally, but because what I'm trying to do is get an external movement, I've put them on the outside to allow for the actual movement of the slider. The slider piece is the bit that will have the blades mounted onto it. You can see that that can move freely across that carriage unless the locking mechanisms are in place. Now the idea is that that latches into place, and the tension that's built up within the spring is what fires it down the track when that gate opens. What makes the whole thing work is the spring assembly that I've got here. The little arm coming out to the side there is the operation lever, and it both builds up the tension in the spring and releases the tension in the spring in that last centimetre of movement. So I'll pop that in place, and hopefully I can show you how it works. You can see the notch that we've got cut out here. That notch allows the gate section to fall into place. You'll have to imagine that that piece is sat in there like that. So as that travels, it's still held in place, and this slot allows for the tension to be built up in the spring. As the tension builds up in the spring, that last centimetre of travel pushes the gate out of the way and releases the tension on the spring. So the tension that we're talking about is that spring there, which is held in that position up until that last minute, and then fires, catapulting the carriage down the track until it catches at the other end. And because this is a mirror image of each other, this is mirrored on the same side here, that gate closes as it passes by. So as it passes by, the spring pushes it out of the way, and then it drops back into place again, and then the whole thing is repeated in the opposite direction. I'll see if I can do this without cutting my finger off. As that pushes in, you can see the tension building on the spring. This is where it's being held here. The gate is being held closed. As soon as it gets to that point where it releases, it catapults and throws halfway across my workshop. Now normally with the top cover in place that wouldn't happen. It would just slide to the end, be caught, and the whole process can be repeated again with that latch catch sort of mechanism. And that is basically how it works. So the next thing to do is to clean it all up, take out any little wobbly elements to it, add the spring back in, and get it working to 100% reliable when it comes to its forward and backward movement. And then the top cover, which holds all that in place, that has got enough thickness in this that I can sort of tap threads directly into this for when it comes to making up the final look of the gauntlet. So I hope I've described that well enough to give you an idea on how it works. If you have any other questions that I haven't covered in this setup, just let me know in the comment section below, and I'll do what I can to get back to you. Anyway, that's the update for this time, guys. Thanks for watching. Talk to you next time.